My husband's estate, valued at $100 million, along with our house, will be passed down to me. Since we don't have any children, everything will come to me alone. However, my sister-in-law often speaks with a sense of entitlement that makes it seem like she expects something different. My name is Laura, and I'm a 48-year-old who works part-time. My husband and I are parents to 3 wonderful sons. One is a senior, and the other is a sophomore in high school. This year, my eldest son is preparing for his college entrance exams, and he aspires to become a lawyer. He has been working very hard toward this goal, which has been a dream of his since he was a young child. I believe my son's passion for law might be influenced by my older brother Brian, who is also a lawyer. A few years ago, my brother established his own law firm and even hired several lawyers to work with him. My eldest son grew up admiring my brother's achievements, which further fueled his interest in studying and consistently achieving good grades, even during his elementary school years. When my brother learned about my son's desire to follow in his footsteps and become a lawyer, he was absolutely thrilled and has been encouraging him ever since. Whenever my son and my brother meet, my son always tells him with determination, "Uncle, I'm going to be a lawyer just like you." My brother, often amused, chuckles and replies, "Hurry up and become a lawyer, so you can follow in my footsteps." Despite being married, my brother doesn't have children of his own. When he visits us, he happily spends time with my sons, playing with them and indulging their every whim. My brother's wife is 8 years younger than him, but unfortunately, she's not someone who is easy to get along with. She has a rather difficult personality and never visits our house, so we don't have much of a relationship. When my brother and I lost our parents at a young age, he took on the role of a guardian for me. He was there to walk me down the aisle when I got married, and not long after that, he got married himself. My husband and I were relieved to hear that my brother had found someone to marry, especially a young woman who could bring happiness into his life. However, when we finally met his fiancée, I was taken aback by how unhappy and sulky she seemed. We were expecting to meet a joyful woman who was excited to marry my brother, but instead, she looked at us with a rather grumpy expression. Despite my surprise, I tried to be polite and said in front of my brother and his fiancée, "You two make a great couple." But later, when I was alone with my husband, I confessed my true feelings. I couldn't help but express my concern about her demeanor and how it might affect my brother in the long run. I couldn't help but wonder why my sister-in-law seemed so unhappy after she and my brother got married. My husband noticed it too and shared my concern, saying, "She wasn't exactly a cheerful bride, was she? But there's nothing we can do about it now." My brother had married a woman 8 years younger than him, and just before their wedding, he bought a beautiful house. To celebrate, my husband and I took our children to visit them. The house was magnificent, just as I expected from my brother, who owns a successful law firm. But when we arrived, my sister-in-law was nowhere to be seen. In a light-hearted attempt to break the ice, my husband joked with my brother, "Has your wife already left you?" However, instead of laughing, my brother's expression became serious, which made both my husband and me uneasy. My brother explained that whenever there's an issue, his wife returns to her parents' house. That day, she was staying with her mother to celebrate her birthday. My husband felt bad for making the joke, his shoulders slumping in regret. Then, out of nowhere, my brother asked us with a straight face, "If I can't have children of my own, would you consider letting me adopt one of yours?" At first, I thought my brother was joking, but his serious demeanor told me otherwise. His unexpected request left me speechless, but my husband, trying to lighten the mood, chuckled and said, "We can't predict the future, so let's talk about it if that time ever comes. If you're okay with our kids, you can adopt whichever one you want." Though my husband didn't take the request seriously and brushed it off, I couldn't shake the unease I felt about the whole situation. I was particularly worried about the tension between my brother and his wife. It was clear that something wasn't right between them, but I didn't feel it was my place to interfere. After that, whenever we visited my brother's house or he came over to ours, It was always just him. My sister-in-law never joined us, and my brother never brought her up in conversation, so I avoided asking about her. They had been married for more than 8 years, and over time, it was almost as if I had forgotten she existed. This year, my eldest son was accepted into his dream law school, and my brother came over to our house to celebrate the good news. However, during the visit, he brought up the topic of adoption again. Like I mentioned before, would you allow me to adopt one of your children? He asked, this time with a seriousness that caught me off guard. My brother and his wife had been unable to have children, and it seemed that this issue had been weighing heavily on him for years. They had just gotten married the last time he asked, and now, all these years later, the question had resurfaced. We had discussed the possibility of adoption before, so there wasn't any rush to make a decision. However, this time my brother seemed more serious about it. Even so, my husband didn't seem to grasp the weight of the situation and responded quickly, would you prefer to adopt our eldest son since he wants to be a lawyer? My husband said it so casually, but I was much more cautious. After all, this was a significant, life-changing decision for our sons. Although they would be with my brother, their uncle, I knew they would be fine in terms of family connection, but my concerns ran deeper. I was particularly worried about my sister-in-law. What if she didn't treat my son well because he wouldn't be her biological child? So I asked my brother, is your wife on board with the idea of adoption? My brother gave a small sour smile and said, don't worry about her, we've already talked it through. His words gave me some relief, knowing they had discussed it as a couple. Still, I couldn't decide on the spot. I wanted to talk it over with my 3 sons first. They were both in high school, old enough to have a say in such a big decision. So, we left the conversation there for the day, agreeing to think it over. A few days later, I received a call from my brother's law firm. They informed me that my brother had collapsed. Panicked, I rushed to the hospital, where I found several of his colleagues waiting anxiously. My brother had suffered a stroke while at work and was now unconscious. After I arrived, the staff from the law firm left, but not before mentioning that they had been unable to reach my sister-in-law. I tried calling her on their home phone, but there was no answer. I didn't even have her cell phone number. Later, my husband and our younger son arrived at the hospital, but despite our efforts, we still couldn't get in touch with my sister-in-law. Eventually, my second son found a smartphone among my brother's belongings. We managed to unlock it and searched for her number. When I called, she answered angrily. I told you not to call again. I will sue you. Her harsh tone shocked me, but I quickly said, it's Laura, Brian's sister. My brother has passed out and was taken to the hospital. As soon as she realized it was me on the phone, her tone softened. Oh, I'm so sorry. I thought it was Brian. You said he collapsed. I explained my brother's condition and told her which hospital he was in. Surprisingly, she responded almost cheerfully. I can't come to the hospital right now because I have things to do, but please let me know if there are any updates. And with that, she hung up the phone. I couldn't help but wonder what could possibly be more important to her than being by her sick husband's side. It was clear that my sister-in-law wasn't going to be of any help, so we decided to take care of my brother ourselves. Since my eldest son had just finished his university entrance exams and was spending most of his time relaxing at home, he took on the responsibility of visiting my brother at the hospital every day on my behalf. Despite our efforts, my brother never regained consciousness and remained in critical condition. Yet, during this entire time, my sister-in-law neither called nor visited the hospital. About a week after my brother was hospitalized, I decided to call her again. This time she answered quickly and, to my shock, asked gleefully, "What's the matter? Did he die?" Her rude and heartless attitude made me want to scream at her, but I held back and quietly replied, "No, he's still alive. Why don't you visit the hospital?" Her response only irritated me further. "I'm not a doctor, nor am I a spiritual healer. There's nothing I can do to help him recover," she retorted, as if she were annoyed by my call. Her cold and uncaring demeanor enraged me even more, so I hung up the phone. It was then that I began to suspect that my brother's desire to adopt one of my sons might have stemmed from his troubled marriage. Perhaps he had already given up on the idea of having children with his wife. When my brother first got married, I had asked him how they met, and he mentioned that they had been introduced through a marriage counseling agency. I started to wonder if my sister-in-law had married him simply because he was a lawyer and she wanted to live a comfortable life. This thought made me even angrier. When I shared my concerns with my husband, he pointed out something even more unsettling. If Brian dies in this situation, he said, his wife will inherit everything, since they don't have any children. My husband suggested that perhaps the reason my brother had brought up the idea of adoption when he came to celebrate our son's acceptance into law school was because he was thinking about what would happen to his estate. I wished I could have made a decision about the adoption back then, but it was too late now. After my brother left that day, I casually mentioned the idea of adoption to my 3 sons. My younger son surprised me by saying he would be happy to be adopted. Unlike his older brother, he didn't have any clear goals at the moment and seemed to think that being adopted by Brian would give him an easy life. I had expected my eldest son, who looked up to his uncle and wanted to be a lawyer, to also want to be adopted, but his response surprised me even more. "I don't want to be adopted," he said firmly. "As the eldest son, I will take care of you, Mom and Dad." I was overjoyed by his words, but at the same time, I knew that my eldest son, with his ambitions to become a lawyer, was the right one to be adopted by my brother. It pained me that I couldn't complete the adoption process on behalf of my brother while he was unconscious, but there was nothing more I could do. I was left feeling disappointed and helpless, knowing that the decision was out of my hands. I had no interest in my brother's inheritance, but the thought of my sister-in-law getting even a penny of his estate made me uneasy, especially since she seemed to be waiting eagerly for his death. All I could do was hope for my brother's recovery, but sadly, that didn't happen. A few days later, my brother passed away, and I had no choice but to inform my sister-in-law. I called her and said, "My brother has passed away. Can we arrange the funeral?" To my surprise, she responded cheerfully, as if she had been waiting for this news. "Everything is up to you," she said, "but please don't involve me as a pallbearer. I don't want to deal with any formalities." Before I could even react, she quickly hung up the phone. With no other option, my husband and I took on the responsibility of planning the funeral. The staff from my brother's law firm were incredibly helpful, assisting us in various ways. My husband was also concerned about the future of the law firm, but it turned out that my brother had already taken care of everything. Although he was the representative lawyer, he had delegated the management of the firm to someone he trusted, ensuring that it would continue to operate smoothly as a corporation. Many people attended my brother's funeral, and so many wreaths were sent that they couldn't all fit in the hall. It was during the funeral that I truly realized how respected and admired my brother was. My sons also helped out at the funeral, but my younger son, in particular, was frustrated when he saw the presidents of major corporations, politicians, and other important figures in attendance. He muttered, "I knew I should have been adopted. I had no idea how amazing Uncle Brian was." My husband and I both understood his feelings of regret. He saw the influence and respect my brother commanded and felt he had missed an opportunity. I served as the pallbearer, but no one asked why my sister-in-law wasn't present, and no one even mentioned her absence. It made me wonder if we were the only ones who even knew my brother was married. My brother and his wife had never had a wedding ceremony, choosing instead to just go on a honeymoon. It's possible that even our relatives didn't know they were married. Seeing how things turned out, I almost wished they had never married at all. What kind of wife doesn't attend her own husband's funeral? I also regretted not agreeing to let my brother adopt my younger son sooner. I feared that now, my sister-in-law would take all of my brother's estate. But with the help of the law firm staff, we managed to complete the funeral arrangements. After the service, I invited everyone to my brother's house for a meal to thank them for their support. My brother will be able to rest in peace because of all of you, I said. We were all very sad, but it felt like a proper way to honor him. Just then, my sister-in-law made an appearance, wearing a flashy pink coat that was entirely out of place for the occasion. I approached her, sensing that she had deliberately chosen to arrive just as the funeral was ending. "Why are you here now, after everything?" I asked her. With a big smile plastered on her face, she raised her voice so everyone could hear. "My husband's estate, worth $100 million, along with this house, will all be mine. We don't have any children, so everything belongs to me as his wife." She spoke triumphantly, but to my surprise, a few of my brother's colleagues started chuckling. We looked at them in confusion, unsure of why they were laughing. My sister-in-law, clearly annoyed, glared at them and snapped, "What exactly are you laughing at? You're being so rude." One of the lawyers smirked and calmly replied, "We're laughing because we all know that you're officially divorced. We were aware of the outcome of your divorce settlement the day before he collapsed." I was shocked and blurted out, "What? You were divorced?" I looked over at my sister-in-law, whose face had turned from smugness to sheer horror as she stared at the lawyers who had just exposed the truth. Her teeth clenched, and another lawyer spoke up. "I also heard that you were ordered to pay alimony because your affair led to the divorce." "It's only fair." My sister-in-law, now furious, yelled back at the lawyer, "I'm not required to pay alimony, am I? There's no one left to pay." She tried to sound mocking, but it was clear she was out of her depth. The lawyer quickly countered, "The right to receive alimony will be inherited by Laura. She's the sole inheritor." It was only then that I realized I was indeed my brother's sole heir. With our parents gone and the divorce finalized, there was no one else. My sister-in-law seemed to realize this too, and she looked at me with a horrified expression, causing me to step back. But she wasn't ready to give up. She began yelling again, "Don't I get half of the estate now that the divorce is finalized?" One of the lawyers, looking dismayed, responded, "Didn't Brian already give you a settlement when the divorce was finalized? I have the receipt as proof. And by the way, the house was purchased before your marriage, so it's not subject to property division." Watching her being schooled by the lawyers was oddly satisfying, despite the tense situation. She seemed to remember something and suddenly chuckled. "There's life insurance," she said with a sly grin. "I'm still the beneficiary." Her audacity in the face of all this hostility was astonishing. She claimed that she had changed the beneficiary of Brian's life insurance to herself. However, the lawyer quickly shot that down as well. "Brian was a careful man. I'm certain he changed the beneficiary when the divorce was finalized." As I searched through my brother's belongings, I found the life insurance policy. My sister-in-law, who had been watching me closely, snatched the policy from my hands and quickly scanned it for the beneficiary's name. When she saw it, her face fell in disappointment, and she handed the document back to me. I glanced at it and saw that I was listed as the beneficiary. Realizing she was at a dead end, my sister-in-law suddenly blurted out her true feelings in frustration. "I married a lawyer because I thought he was wealthy, but all I've gotten is a small amount of money, and now I have to pay alimony. This was a huge mistake." One of the lawyers present, with a grim expression, responded, "Brian felt the same way. He regretted ever seeking advice from a marriage counselor. He admitted he made a huge mistake." My brother had never shared these thoughts with me, but it was clear he had been honest with his colleagues and subordinates. Unable to come up with a response, my sister-in-law stormed out of my brother's house, defeated. Later, she would be required to pay the alimony in installments, but without a job, she quickly found herself in a difficult situation. She started looking for work, but having never held a serious job before, she quit almost immediately. Desperate to find a way out, she re-registered with the marriage counseling agency, hoping to find another wealthy man to exploit for quick money. She did manage to find a wealthy man and convinced him that she needed money for marriage, but he soon realized her true intentions and reported her to the police. She was arrested for marriage fraud. A lawyer from my brother's law firm later informed me that, to be honest, no alimony had ever been paid to me. When I visited the lawyer to discuss it, he explained that with her recent arrest, it was unlikely I would see any alimony payments in the foreseeable future. Alimony was never my primary concern, though. I was more interested in seeing her face the consequences of her actions. I believe my brother would have agreed with me. I hoped the police would thoroughly investigate any other crimes she may have committed and ensure she was charged appropriately in court. After unexpectedly inheriting my brother's property, my family moved into the house he had left behind. My husband and sons were thrilled to finally live in a big house after spending years in a small apartment. My eldest son began studying law with even greater determination. Watching my brother's colleagues and subordinates argue with my sister-in-law during the funeral had inspired him even more. Although he was never adopted by my brother, I hope he will carry on my brother's legacy and become a great lawyer like him. Only my younger son seemed upset and a bit disappointed that I had inherited everything. With a half-joking smile, he said, "To be honest, I wish I had been adopted by uncle so I could have inherited everything." His words were playful, but I could sense a hint of regret behind them.